I'm speaking today both as an academic, as David said, I teach at Drexel University, and as a policy advisor to the Pension Rights Center, a 37-year-old consumer advocacy organization, which probably makes it older than some of the people in this room. You just heard from Marcus about HR 2374 and its effect on the SEC. I'll be discussing the threat the bill poses to the Department of Labor's ability to move forward with its own regulatory process to ensure that Americans receive the unbiased investment advice they need to save adequately for retirement. Our nation is experiencing a looming retirement crisis. The Center for Retirement Research at Boston College estimates that we have a $6.6 trillion savings gap in retirement, the difference between what people have already saved for retirement and what they should have already saved. This is an enormous savings shortfall, and it is compounded by permitting salespeople with serious conflicts of interest to advise people how to invest their 401k and IRA money. So this issue is not just academic. It's about protecting real workers, real retirees, and their families from real harm. To understand why investment advisors are permitted to give retirement advice despite serious conflicts of interest, we need to go back in history a bit. For those of you new to this issue, ERISA is the pension reform law that Congress enacted in 1974. It sets high standards for the people who run retirement plans and for the people who give investment advice that affects retirement savings. ERISA says unambiguously that people in firms that give investment advice to people in retirement plans are fiduciaries, and that fiduciaries cannot generally have disabling conflicts of interest. This is not a new idea. It has been the law for close to half a century. But in 1975, the Department of Labor adopted a regulation that artificially constricted the meaning of investment advice. That regulation said that ERISA only makes an investment advisor a fiduciary if the advice given by the advisor is continuous and there's a mutual agreement, as the investment advisor has to agree, that the investment advice will be the primary basis for making investment decisions. So under this narrow definition, an investment advisor can shed his fiduciary status simply by saying that any advice I give you is not intended to serve as the primary basis for your investment decisions. And if you look at the Fidelity ad, which was in the New Yorker last year, that was on the table, you'll see this language straight from the regulation in the fine print after the ad says, "Come let me help you plan your retirement." Now, why was this definition so narrowly constructed? Well, the world in 1975 was a very different world than it is today. Stephen Jones was still tinkering in his dad's garage. Email meant mail in envelopes. Jennifer Aniston was in first grade. And more pertinent, the 401k plan had not yet been invented, and only a few thousand individual retirement accounts had been opened. Few plans back then gave individual participants the responsibility of making investment decisions. Instead, plan assets were generally managed by professional money managers, and they were the ones who received investment recommendations from brokers and others. These money managers had the experience and sophistication to evaluate investment recommendations and to identify the conflicts of interest of those people who made the recommendations. The world has changed in the intervening decades. Today, some 60 million workers participate in 401k plans, and assets in individual retirement accounts exceed $5 trillion, with the majority of that money flowing from rollovers from employer-sponsored retirement plans. The people participating in 401k plans and IRAs are, for the most part, everyday people without extensive investment training or experience. As a result, they are highly dependent on the advice offered to them by the investment industry. Unfortunately, the recommendations they receive are sometimes infected by serious conflicts of interest. Some brokers, hiding in the shadows of the 1975 regulation, guide their clients toward investments that maximize the broker's commissions and other compensation, regardless of whether the client might be better served by other investment options. And here this gets a bit personal for me. My brother and I recently went over my 85-year-old mother's investment portfolio with her. Her investment advisor had her primarily in a mutual fund, invested 46% in stock and 35% in junk bonds, a ridiculous level of risk for an octogenarian. So why is my mother in this risky fund? Well, it paid her broker an extremely high sales fee and continued to pay his firm fees for each year my mother remained in the fund. I suspect that these payments may have clouded the broker's judgment. It is thus good, necessary, and fitting that the Department of Labor is looking to update its 38-year-old rule to address current realities. Of course, no one yet knows what a new regulation will say, but we do know that representatives of the investment industry and consumer advocates, such as the Pension Rights Center, will have ample opportunity to review and comment and engage in dialogue with the Department of Labor when it does propose new rules. Congress should defeat H.R. 2374 and allow the Department of Labor to do its job of protecting the retirement savings of American working men and women.